Welcome to your favorite YouTube channel, Cartoonist Kayfabe. My name is Ed Piscor, and I have a treat for you tonight, boys and girls. The great Pete Bagge is going to join me, but at first, I have a little bit of business ahead of time. Hip Hop Family Tree Omnibus is in stores now. You can get it pretty cheap on Amazon. I think it's like 40% off at the moment. Recently put out Red Room Crypto Killers, the third trade paperback for Red Room. We're on a road to 100,000 subscribers here at Cartoonist Kayfabe. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't done so. And I'm going to have a solo art show here in downtown Pittsburgh come April 6th towards the end of August at the 707 Gallery. So if you're in Pittsburgh, swing through, check that out. My books over the past decade have been published by Fantagraphics, and you will never hear me stop saying how important Fantagraphics is to me. In those 1990s, we started this channel off on the back of Wizard magazine, going through that heap, week in, week out, taking a look at the mid 90s era of comics, which was pretty desolate. The publisher that had the best batting average, who were doing the best comics at the time, is Fantagraphics. You cannot disable the power of my label. If we were to categorize Fantagraphics like a basketball team or something, we're looking at the 1992 Olympic basketball team for the United States. Michael Jordan, Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, that type of pedigree. Dan Clowes, Chris Ware, Charles Burns, Peter Bagge with Hate Comics. I am happy to bring Pete back to the Cartoonist Kayfabe channel because he's bringing Hate Comics back. Uncle Pete, thanks for coming on to Cartoonist Kayfabe with me for a little bit here tonight, Pete.
Sure, thanks for inviting me. It's been a long time since I'd seen you.
It has been a long time. I believe it was Memphis, Tennessee might have been
the last
time we all hung out.
That's
right. I believe we had barbecued spaghetti for dinner that one night.
We had the Gus's famous chicken, fried chicken.
Okay. Now, when is this new Hate comic coming out, Pete?
It's going to come out originally as a 4-part comic book miniseries, and the first issue is due out in June. So June, July, August, September. Fantagraphics has already promoted the cover for the first one, but like I told you, Ed, I'll email you the covers for the other ones if you want to share them with your followers.
Yeah, fantastic, man. So if it's June, March, April, May, it might be in the book right now for your comic shop to put in their orders. So start bugging your comic shops. Let them know that you want the new Hate series, man, so that Fantagraphics knows how many of these motherfuckers need printed up.
That's right.
We got to goose the numbers, man. It's so good to have you back on that series, Pete. Earlier today we released a video where we were going through the great, fantastic backup story in the back of Hate issue number 27, collaboration with Robert Crumb, where you guys are cutting promos on Kathy Geiswhite in 1997. And I made mention of, there's this great stuff that's been happening in recent years where, Mike Judge was back on Beavis and Butthead for a couple of seasons. And, in the times that we live in right now, there's so much fodder for satire and just a fresh point of view. And no time like the present, man, to bring Fuddy-Duddy Buddy Bradley back into the mix.
Sure. And the idea of bringing it back was actually my Spanish publisher, who basically they reprint and translate everything that Fantagraphics does. Well, everything that I publish, it seems to do very well over there. So recently, a year or two ago, I did a book signing tour in Spain, which went extremely well. So the publishers there were like, we'll give you a generous advance if you would just do more Hate comics. So that was something I had never thought about. I just released the complete Hate, so it's not complete anymore. I do more. But I thought about it, thought about how it would work. Because here's the thing, I've always done, with my Buddy Bradley stories, they're chronological. He's always roughly 10 years younger than me. So if I did a comic with him now, he'd be in his 50s. But I've also noticed that people, when they're nostalgic for Hate, What they mainly missed was like Buddy when he was in his 20s. Those black and white hates. They want nostalgia, and now I would admit it, in Spain, I brought that up. I said everybody's just going to want to see Buddy and the gang when they were young. I'm like, oh no, they won't. They'd see him now. It's like, no, they don't want to see him now. But what I decided to do was combine it. It's going to be both him and his family in the present, but also in each issue there'll be at least 2 stories where you cut back to the past, and those will be in black and white and crosshatched like I did it in the olden days. So hopefully that'll make everybody happy.
It's so interesting the way the game has been played in the past couple of years, because these foreign publishers are really kind of putting the battery in the back for cartoonists to it's creating this opportunity to make just a better income as a cartoonist. It's interesting because I just had Dave Cooper on last week, and it was I believe French publisher who was the impetus to kind of get him back into the mix.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of funny how that works. How much of this hate comic do you have done so far?
It's almost all done. I'm on the home stretch of the 4th issue, so almost done. And it's funny. It's like riding a bike. All the characters just came right back. It felt very natural and easy. It made me wonder why I killed off Stinky, because I'm doing these old stories with Stinky, and I go, this guy is really funny. What the hell was I thinking? Killing him off. I'm having a lot of fun working with him.
I don't know if you have this experience with the comics that you've read over the years, but there are people who traffic in comics that the comics they make, they call them humor comics, but you don't really laugh. You just might see big feet and know that that's supposed to be like a humor comic. All told, man, there are very few comics that legitimately get me to laugh out loud, and your comics have consistently done that for me for 25 years, and a lot of that has to do with Stinky at times, man.
Right.
I remember one of my favorite ones is because it's just purely masterful cartooning, because it happened on the page turn where Stinky's showing his genitals and is asking if there's some sort of herpes or some shit on it, man. And it was kind of a surprise, that jumps out at you.
Right.
It speaks to the cartooning, because you have all the chops, man. The art is it's all there. The lettering is all there. Your own kind of hand styles with it, and certainly the way you pace these stories is fantastic, man.
Oh, thank you very much. Thanks very much.
You brought up advances couple of minutes ago, man. And something I was always wondering when I hooked up with Fantagraphics 2012, 2013, I was so excited to be on the team because I do hold all of you guys in such reverence. I mean, the best comics of my teens and youth came from the Pacific Northwest pedigree of comics. So, I'm talking to Gary, I'm talking to Kim, who's still around at the time, and put the name on the dotted line, and Hip Hop Family Tree is going to be a Fantagraphics comic. And then Dan Clowes goes to Drawn and Quarterly and does Wilson, and Gilbert Hernandez goes over there, does Marble Season, and you go over there and do the Margaret Sanger book, and I'm like, how come all of my favorite people are leaving when I hooked up with these guys, man? What was happening back then?
It had everything to do with advances. At the time, for whatever reason, Drawn and Quarterly was offering far more generous advances, and of course it upset Fantagraphics. I don't know to what extent this is true, but they. Drawn and Quarterly was getting some subsidies from the Canadian government and the Quebec government, and Fantagraphics wasn't getting anything like that. So they kind of felt like this is a little unfair. But we've also all come crawling back.
That's true. Yeah.
Graphics.
Yeah, man. That was such a interesting period of time too, because you also, I think Peggy put you guys on tour for your books, and you and I we cross paths a lot of times across the country whenever your book came out from them. And, you know, I feel like if you get your hand on those tour posters, like that's how to plot out your book tour. It seemed like super logical. And
Right.
there've been times where, you know, I was on tour with stuff where like I'm bouncing all around and I'm like, I feel like this ain't the most efficient way of doing things.
Yes. No, the bouncing isn't so good. But I just wanted to ask real quick: is your work been translated into foreign languages?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And I mean, that is like a secret kind of incredible source of extra income. You know, sometimes the French stuff can be equal to the rewards that you get from the United States market.
Right. Yeah. It's as far as I can tell, my work has never done particularly great in any foreign market except for Spain, and I don't. It's hard to explain why, but I think it's the translation. But in Spain, I've done fantastic. In other countries, not nearly as well. So I don't know what that's all about.
Yeah,
Well, but it is translated into French at the moment and Italian.
yeah, you would think that you know, it would be the exact kind of parody on American culture that, you know, that the Europeans would enjoy.
Right. Yes.
So Pete, you went to School of Visual Arts, correct?
Yes, for 3 measly semesters, a year and a half. I went there.
What period of time is that?
It was in '77.
So
And
is that Holmstrom and Legs McNeil and
well, they were before me. I met them after I quit. I met them a few years later. There was it's driving me crazy that there was this guy doesn't do comics anymore, but there was a cartoonist named Buzzy. I think he used to do some comics. I don't even remember his last name. I just knew him as Buzzy. And he used to do comics for I think for Creepy and Eerie, stuff like that. And he also did some illustrations for Punk magazine. And he was the one who told me to go show my work to the people at Punk magazine, which would have been John Holmstrom, Lex McNeil, Bruce Carlton. And so I did, and they liked my work. They were going to publish me, but then they went out of business. But I knew just vaguely, like in my own grade, my own class at SVA, there were one or two cartoonists who, not many that I had much in common with. It was mainly like Holmstrom had already left SVA by the time I started. And then there were a bunch of cartoonists whose work I loved who came after me, and that would be Drew Freeman and Kaz and Mark Newgarden. There were plenty of others. But yeah, it seemed to be people who were just a bit younger than me that I mainly hung out with after a while.
So you stuck around in that area because I think those guys, they went to school it was like the early 80s.
Yeah, late 70s, early 80s. And
I know.
And we met them too. I got to know them because of Raw magazine. Most of those guys did stuff for Raw,
right?
And then me and Holmstrom did Comical Funnies, and so some of those cartoonists did work for Comical Funnies. Another publication that almost all of us did work for was Screw magazine.
Oh yeah.
If you ever saw those, it was a tabloid, just this porno tabloid. And they didn't pay great, but they had comics in every issue, and they would have a cartoonist draw every cover. And so that was like nice, steady work. And we used to meet and hang out at the Screw magazine offices.
Was that on 42nd Street?
It was on 14th.
Okay.
Street. And Drew Friedman's brother, Josh Friedman, the two of them used to collaborate. Josh used to write a lot of Drew's early work. He was an editor at Screw magazine, so I would get a lot of work from him, like working for him a lot.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and Bruce Carlton, who used to be the art director at Punk, he later became the art director of Screw, and after him was Ken Wiener, who later went by the name Ken Avador. He was the art director there. So, and before that, when I first started working there, the art director was a former underground cartoonist named Yossarian. I think that was his name, Yossarian. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Now I can't remember his first name, but he was actually a pretty good underground cartoonist. And And when I mentioned to Robert Crumb that he worked there, then Crumb started doing work for Screw magazine.
We had Bill Griffith on the channel earlier in the year, and he mentioned doing some stuff for Screw early on, and he said that the art director, the time that he was sending stuff in there, went on to become like the New York Times art critic. Which guy is that?
Oh, I can't remember his name.
So it wasn't one of the guys that you mentioned.
Yeah, I just recently saw like that very person you're talking about. His name is escaping me. I just saw him on some vlog podcast thing. I can't remember what he was talking about either.
Yeah,
but quite a few people, all through the 70s, a lot of people, art directors and editors, went directly from Screw magazine to the New York Times. and so by the time I was doing work for Screw, some of the guys working there were like, oh, I'm going to get a job with the New York Times. My friends are going to hook me up. And then finally somebody at the time said, you know what? This Screw to New York Times pipeline, we're cutting it off. It doesn't mean they didn't know what they were doing. They knew what they were doing. They were good.
Yeah, sure, man. You're cutting your teeth on that, on print media, deadlines, all of that stuff. Did you go back to porno at all in the mid '90s? Whenever W.T. Nelson was art director at Hustler, because he was bringing a lot of people in. Klaus did the masthead for the letters page, and Coop would do stuff. Jaime would do stuff.
Yeah, I did a lot of stuff for Hustler because first of all, they paid great.
Yeah,
I don't remember dealing with the art director though. There was a somebody who just passed away recently, a guy named Mike McPadden, who used to have the pen name of Selwyn Harris. I used to let him write stuff in Hate, in the latter days of Hate. And so him and another guy named Aaron Lee, who is now a television writer, the two of them were editors for Flint Publications. And they would give me, when they would give you work, it would be great payment. And it was the assignments were a lot of fun too. And their senior editor too, a guy named oh my god, Mick. Oh geez, I'm totally spacing on his name. He would call us up too. And I remember once Dan Klaus telling me, "Oh, I'm doing something for Hustler." He goes, "The pay is so great, and I can't believe how insane it is." And I said, "What is it?" And he goes, "The guy just called me up and said, we're doing this expose on a pedophile that we totally made up." And Klaus was like, "Great."
It's so funny, man. It was like 2000, 2001. I sent, there would be that book called The Artist Market, and you could get it at any kind of Barnes and Noble or whatever. And it would just have every art director from every magazine. But it's like a 500-page thing. And they really just like pad it out by having like one entry for every Flint publication. You know what I'm saying? So I would send stuff to like Big Brother magazine, the skateboard mag. And actually, no, this is earlier. This is like the late 90s, because I was 17 years old, and I was sending stuff to Big Brother. And what I was going for was just trying to do cartoons, like a little one panel deal. And because it went to Flint, that Hustler art director guy, W.T. Nelson, who was the dude that corralled almost everybody,
Right.
He called the house and was like, he had a Southern accent from what I remember. And he's like, "You don't want to do these cartoons. You know, we might buy them for $800 a piece, but that's chump change. You want to do the 2-page spread for our article each month, and I'll set you up with this one." And I ended up doing it. And when it came time to like W-9 or like, 1099 form or something,
Yeah.
he's like, "You didn't tell me you were 17 years old." I'm like, "You didn't ask, man." And then,
is that a problem?
Yeah, I mean, it's porno, and like I'm drawing like pussies and dicks and all kinds of shit like that, man. And then I was like, my dad's name is Ed Piscor. Like, can we do something like that? He's like, "Dude, fuck that. No, we can't." And then I saw the final printed piece, and it was a Jaime. So that they got somebody excellent to do the work. But
so you wound up not doing anything for them?
Right. But years later, he became the art director of a thing called Arthur that was like a free weekly for a little time there during the George W. Bush era in he brought me
Right.
on for some of that stuff. But it is funny how I think about those '90s, man, and how you did these books, and I know that the pay couldn't have been like extremely great or anything. So it was always cool to see. It was fun to see where you guys would show up outside of the comic to just kind of keep things going. And I think it was like sixth or seventh grade. I had my grunge pencils that I got from Hill's department store, right? Would that be like 93, 94, or something like that?
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah, something like that.
How does stuff like that happen?
It just all through the '80s. It was such a struggle for me. Just if it wasn't from the fact that my wife had a decent paying job, I couldn't have done it.
Yeah.
I was just. It wasn't until like 1989 that I was making a 5-figure income. I was just scraping by. But then it all had to do with hate. I started hate. It did well right out of the gate, and that just seemed to lead to all kinds of offers. Part of the reason that after a while with hate, part of the reason I started hiring anchors like Jim Blanchard and to a lesser degree Eric Reynolds was because I had more work than I could keep up with, and didn't want to turn any of it down. And those guys were up for working, so I always felt I haven't done that in a really long time. I haven't collaborated or hired an anchor in a very long time, but that was the only way I could keep up. And like I said, there was just not only was there a lot of work, it was good paying work. So just in things like grunge pencils, there were so many crazy opportunities that were coming my way back then.
Here's a silly one, man. When you watch the movie Kids at the very beginning, after Telly the Virgin Surgeon does his thing, he comes down, sitting on the stoop is Casper, the dopest ghost, reading an issue of Hate,
Right.
and then Casper turns out to be like the rapist of the movie.
Yeah. Well, that was
how does that feel?
It's funny. Whenever a television show or a film they want to use something of mine as a prop, they would get my permission. They would, through Fantagraphics or whoever, they would. I'd have to fill out a release form, and I used to always think, why did they bother asking? This is all free publicity. It's free advertising. The answer is always going to be yes. It will be yes 100% of the times. But then I saw that movie you were just describing. I saw the movie Kids. I'm like, wait a minute. The movie opens up with a rapist reading my comic. I go, this, I might have said no. But it's still, I'm kind of glad that I didn't, because so many people saw that.
No, that's true.
A lot of people who told me, that's the first time I ever heard of your comic. They were like, I was watching that movie and it was like, there's a comic called Hate. So, who knows? I guess it was a good thing. I don't know. But yeah, I really got creeped out though. Like with the context.
Even at the time I had that issue, man, so it gave me a little street cred with the friends, because I was just a kid like when that thing came out, and man, my peer group, they were some fucking dummies because they thought that flick was a documentary.
Oh,
and I'm like, what are you talking about, man? Let's jump back even further now, man. We'll just bounce around for the hell of it. How the heck does Robert Crumb trust you to be an editor for Weirdo Magazine? Like, what kind of stripes did you have to make him feel like you could handle the gig?
I don't know. I saw Weirdo Magazine, the first issue when it came out, and of course I snatched it up just like anything by Crumb. He was my favorite artist, so anything he did, I couldn't wait to buy it. And I was shocked. Well, two things. I was shocked to see when I opened up Weirdo that his mailing address was in there. His P.O. box was in there. So I was like, well, this is great. I could actually write to him, because that was a first. And then I also saw that Weirdo was not just Crumb's art. It was a magazine that he was open to publishing other people. So around that time is when I started with my friends. We started Comical Funnies. So I immediately wrote to him, sent him copies of everything I was working on. He would write back. At first he didn't run anything by me. After a while, he did start running work by me. And since I was the editor, a co-editor of Comical Funnies, I guess he figured, I've got, as limited as it is, I have some experience doing that, being a boss. And also years later, he just told me of all of the cartoonists that were writing to him. I seemed the least fucked up. So,
Most
yeah,
responsible.
yeah. So that was that.
Was the biggest bitch of your editorial duties hand lettering that letters page every issue?
Yes, that, and also there's something. The magazine is called Weirdos, so of course the people who read it and a lot of people who wanted to their work in it, a lot of them were weirdos, and that's not always a compliment. Well, some of the artists were great to work with; they were a dream to work with, but some were very difficult. Some would threaten to kill me, stuff like that. So I could see why Crumb quit. He found it a bit overwhelming, and so did I. And also, I was also started Neat Stuff, my own comic book. I was doing both at the same time. And Fantagraphics really wanted me to at least get 3 issues out a year. But it was getting to be really difficult to do both. I basically felt like I wasn't giving Weirdo the attention it deserved. I really wasn't doing my due diligence to find and nurture new artists. So after Crumb did it for like 9 issues, I did it for 9, and then Aileen Crumb did it for 9. And I thought she did it much better. One thing that was good with her was that would have been, let's see, 1987, something like that, when she took over. That's when all of a sudden there were so many young artists doing really good work. So I was actually very jealous of the submissions she was getting. I was like, I wasn't getting submissions from any of these people. Maybe they weren't doing comic shit. I don't know, but she had a lot more to pick from than I did.
That year of 1986, that's a watershed year for the history of comics. There's so much, the black and white explosion is a real thing, and the direct market explosion really gains its footing at that period of time, and people really seemed bolstered by the medium. Are there any memorable submissions that you received at that time that didn't make it into publication but kind of still stick in your mind? Anything from prison or something?
I would get letters from prison. I still do.
I remember some issues. It might be a Crumb issues, but he was printing some prison artwork in there.
Yes, yeah. He printed something, maybe even a couple of things, by a woman named Eleanor Norflus, who was in a mental institution, and the work reflected that. I think I pretty much published the most interesting work that I could get my hands on.
Right.
It was after I had quit the artists like all of those early Journey Quarterly artists. That's when they started doing work. I don't think they were published around the time that I was doing Weirdo. I would have published anything by any of them,
Did you guys feel any kind of competition with Raw in any way? Because it's two very very opposite kind of publications.
Well, yes, I was around the time that me and my friends started Comical Funnies. That was also around the same exact time that Spiegelman did Raw. And this is something I've talked about a lot, where I had mixed feelings about Raw. I liked Art personally. I thought he was a talented artist. But this mission of getting the fine art establishment and the people who are and we're in New York City, the capital of the fine art world.
Right.
And I hated that world. I went to art school, fucking hated those people, in large part because they looked down on what I was doing, comics, even illustration. It wasn't art. They would tell me that. All friends of mine who were fine art majors at SVA would tell me, what you do isn't art. Which, of course, I didn't agree with. To me, it was the best art. But also, at the same time, both me and my closest friends, and Crumb felt the same way. We liked that with the type of work that we're doing and how it wasn't being taken seriously, we were able to fly under the radar. We can get away with anything, that because nobody's paying attention. Nobody gives a shit, except other weirdos like us. So we would just do stuff for Screw. It was funny. We all worked for Screw Magazine, and we all worked for the Tops of Bubblegum Company. Either old perverts or children.
It's always been that way. Like in the 90s, you could find, the guys doing stuff like Johnny Ryan would do shit in Hustler and like the porno mags, and he would do stuff in Nickelodeon magazine.
Right. Yes.
That was a viable option.
That's what. And we were. Back then we were like all Johnny Ryans, at least in the world that I was mixing and mingling in, and we didn't give a shit if snobby people, if pretentious people, educated in quotes, if they liked or even paid attention to what we were doing. We didn't want them to pay attention. So we had a problem with Art and Francois that they were trying to win their approval. We thought that was nuts. And it's funny, decades later, Spiegelman was giving a speech at the Seattle Public Library, and I went to hear him talk. And he brought this up. He told the audience, he goes, when I started Raw, my mission was to get comics taken seriously as an art form, to be a respected art form. He goes, and I succeeded. Which is true. He's not lying. He succeeded. He goes, but then he goes, but I kind of miss the days when we were all flying under the radar. And I really wanted to just jump up on the stage and strangle him. but
was he?
Oh, go ahead.
Was he one of your teachers at the School of Visual Arts? Did he come later? You
know what? I quit SVA before I had a chance to take all those cartooning classes.
I see.
But I used to sit in on them. I would occasionally. I still had my student pass. And I would occasionally sneak in and sit in on his classes, and then a tiny bit with who else was teaching there? Will Eisner.
Yeah, was Kurtzman there?
And Kurtzman, yeah. Although Kurtzman, it really seemed more like he was babysitting than teaching. He was starting to not do so good physically, and he didn't seem to have much control of his class.
Yeah, Friedman told us a story here on the channel that Kurtzman brought in Crumb to talk, and Friedman was so excited, and some Joey Jerkoff sitting next to Friedman is like, settle the hell down. It's not like this is Jim Steranko or somebody.
Right. Yeah, well, that was a big. It's probably like the biggest clash at SVA is how many of the students there, the students who wanted to go into cartooning, wanted mainstream comics, superhero comics, and that was all they cared about. That's all they wanted to know. They weren't interested in any other form of cartooning. That was it. But I was going to say real quick though that I forgot about was around the time I met Crumb, we were talking about the philosophy of weirdo.
Yes,
and also this disconnect between cartoonists like us, people like us. Crumb would describe his people as Three Stooges fans,
right?
As opposed to like educated, more effete sophisticates, urban sophisticates, and we both said we kept having that. Back then, it was always the same experience. You'd go to a cocktail party, and people will find out you're a cartoonist, and they would always say, and Crumb said this, I always happened to me, Crumb said back then, always happened to him, he'd say I'm a cartoonist, they'll always start telling you how much they love Doonesbury, how Doonesbury is the best. And neither of us cared for Doonesbury. We're like, okay, fine. Glad you like Doonesbury. And then after they talked about how much they love Doonesbury, then they'd always say, that comic strip Nancy, why is that still in the newspapers? That is the worst piece of shit. I'm like, you like Nancy? And that would happen at literally every cocktail party back then.
Peter, you piqued my curiosity when you talk about the landscape of cartooning when you were going. I know you only did 3 semesters, but I'm curious about like what was the aspiration as a cartoonist, because what else was there besides the mainstream? National Lampoon magazine, perhaps?
Yeah, well, that's just it. When I was in high school and around the time I started going to art school, the the only form of art that I had any inclination towards was cartooning, comics.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really didn't want to be a daily strip cartoonist. That seemed like way too much of a slog, way too difficult to get into. And around that time too, I didn't like any of the new comic strips.
Right.
Everything new I thought sucked. And I was like, well, if that's what they're looking for, I don't want to come up with something like that. Mad was like a closed shop. Obviously, I wound up working for Mad in the aughts, but back then it was just the same people. There was no fresh blood there. Lampoon, I love the National Lampoon. I love Mad. I love National Lampoon, but I didn't know what to come up with for them. They didn't publish a ton of comics. They seemed to have more than enough really good cartoonists working for them. I loved everybody working for them. So I couldn't see anything there. I didn't even know if I should waste my time trying to be a cartoonist until I went to a record store and there was a spin rack of underground comics. Now I had seen just very sporadically and randomly, I had seen some zaps, like in high school, a kid might sneak in a zap, but I didn't know where to buy them. I was stuck in the far edges of the suburbs, and I knew Robert Crumb's comics mainly from like T-shirts and that Janis Joplin record cover. Loved his artwork, but I didn't know that he did his comics. And I can remember there was an issue of High Tone. It was just this one-off comic book he did. And the cover was just a guy pissing in a toilet. And I clicked through it. And it's like he did everything from cover to cover. He used the comic book format as a blank canvas. There were no Twinkies ads, no Schwinn bike ads. It was just all him from the cover to cover. And I was like, this is perfect. This is the perfect format. This is exactly what I want to do. And I saw there was a whole bunch of other cartoonists. I immediately picked out some favorites, Bill Griffith being one, Kim Deitch, Aileen Crum, Diane Newman, Robert Armstrong, Mickey Ratt. They were all my favorites. Those comics, I thought they were so good, that they were all so great, that I just assumed they must all be millionaires. I had no idea that not only were they not, that they were all just scraping by at that time, because it's the 70s. But that they were like, like Crumb, Gilbert Shelton, and Griffith. They were pretty much the only underground cartoonists that were able to make a living off of their comics.
Right.
Nobody else was just doing terrible.
Yeah.
So, but by then, other cartoonists told me they had the same exact experience. It's the same exact trajectory. So you had a whole bunch. It was interesting around that in the early 80s. You had cartoonists like myself and the Hernandez brothers, and a lot of people that you would see in Raw, Charles Burns, Gary Panter, and then there was Linda Barry and Matt Groening. We all got inspired to do comics at the same time. We all started out self-publishing. Almost all of us were publishing our own crap in all these different formats. All the people I just mentioned had wildly different drawing styles and different approaches. But we all were inspired by underground comics, which by then were dead. At the time we discovered them, underground comics was pretty much dead, as opposed to the way it was in the early 70s. And we all had, we all had that moment where it's like, oh, that sucks that you can't make a living doing this anymore. But fuck it, I'm going to keep doing it anyway. In spite of everything, this is what I want to do. With all of us, it's like we couldn't help ourselves. We have to draw our own shit. And that was like the best thing, best advice I'd ever had, and the best philosophy as far for me to keep doing comics was only think about entertaining myself. Don't think about a potential audience. Don't think, oh, well, if I do comics that are kind of sort of like this, I might get it published. I remember I did some comics, these little half-page comics, hoping that I could get them published in the Village Voice, because they ran these little half-page comics there. And I showed them to John Holmstrom. And he said, he could tell immediately, he goes, are you thinking that these will get published in the Village Voice? Which, of course, they didn't. And I go, well, kind of, yeah. And he goes, don't do that. Don't do that. It was just do it for yourself, please yourself. And and I guess they were a little bit messagey because the Village Voice is very political, and that was great advice that Holmstrom gave me. Is he said nobody is ever going to change the world with a fucking comic strip. He's like, just amuse yourself, just have fun with it, be self-indulgent. Who cares?
Yeah, it's a good thing to keep in mind in these modern days. That's for sure.
Yeah, and the same with that's what, of course, obviously, that's what Crumb always said. That was his guiding principle is, I'm just going to draw what's in my head, an audience of one, just always amuse yourself and fuck everybody else.
Were you ever there? Were you on the dais for the famous panel discussion at the Comic-Con with Bern Hogarth and the Fantagraphics posse, including Robert Crumb?
Yes.
Tell the people about that, because we've made allusions to it. We've touched upon it, but nobody really. A firsthand source would be good to have on the record.
Yeah, it was. There's this guy named Larry Reed. He runs the Fantagraphics bookstore in Seattle, and for a while he was the PR guy at Fantagraphics. And he always he's a Seattle native. He used to have his own galleries, and for a while he was running this really big art institution called COCA, Center of Contemporary Art in Seattle. He would put on great shows. Like he would just have a great big show dedicated to Big Daddy Roth. He just had amazing stuff. And so he put together a show called Misfit Lit, which is all about comic art, a celebration of independent comic art. It's a really great show. Another thing that I loved about it too is it was like multimedia. There were bands playing there, little plays. A group of people put on a play version of one of my comic strips, and which came out great. I was very pleased. Anyhow, so there was a panel, and it was a lot of these artists were invited there. So the Hernandez brothers, Robert Crumb was invited there. Aileen was invited. I don't know if she was on the panel though. If she wasn't on the panel, probably it was because she didn't want to be. And Dan Clowes and Bern Hogarth. Bern Hogarth knew Gary Groth, so Gary Groth was on the panel. I think he might have been the moderator. And I think at the time Groth was doing a lot of long interviews with Bern Hogarth for the Comics Journal. And it seemed like Hogarth, he was being a classic cranky old man. I don't think he really knew who any of us were, didn't give a shit. He just felt like we all needed to be schooled, that everything that we said was stupid and or wrong. He kept, either one of us or all of us, he kept calling us Vernon. He thought, or I can't remember which one it was. He thought one of us was named Vernon. So as a joke, on the very next issue of Hate, I wrote on the top by Vernon Bagge, a very very in joke. Yeah, I tried to get the others. I tried to get the Hernandez brothers and Dan to do the same thing. Oh, and the next issue would be Vernon Hernandez. Okay. And but they didn't do it. And I there was something about whatever it was that Hogarth was saying. I guess the rest of us, we were still pretty young. We all know who he was. And we weren't going to argue with him. Who the fuck were we? It's like, all right. I think Hogarth was one of the founders of the School of Visual Arts, believe it. And amazingly, Crumb didn't know who he was. He just thought he was this old fucking asshole. And so Crumb was arguing with him. They were really getting into it. They were really arguing with each other. Crumb was like making fun of him. And it wasn't until later that he said to Groth, "Who the fuck was that? Who was that guy? Why did you drag him on stage with us? Why do we have to put up with that shit?" He just didn't know. And so Groth showed him collections of Hogarth's work. I think the one book that's been in print forever by Hogarth was a book on anatomy, drawing from real life. And Crumb looked at it, he goes, "This guy's amazing." And Crumb suddenly felt terrible. Because I couldn't believe I was talking down to this guy. And I said, well, he was being an arrogant asshole. He goes, "I know, but look at his drawings. This guy is amazing." And amazingly, Crumb had never heard of him, had no idea who he was.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Please continue.
No, that was it.
Well, from what I understand, the culmination of events is as Hogarth continues to speak his piece, Crumb kind of deflates the whole situation by doing like a kind of a pratfall or something.
Oh yes, yeah. I guess because Hogarth was going on a bit long. It was a bit long-winded. Yeah, so Crumb actually, I couldn't believe he didn't hurt himself. He just slowly pushed his chair back and fell over backwards.
That's like a Kurtzman joke, I believe.
Yes.
I feel like it's kind of easy.
The old comic book flop.
It's kind of easy to believe that Robert Crumb wasn't keeping up with Tarzan daily strips when he was picking up Little Lulus and Carl Barks Duck comics and stuff like that. It's one of those things that we kind of can't deny whenever we're doing stuff, whenever we're looking at things from the 80s and 90s. Like there just was this tremendous bifurcation that, like, as readers and comic fans that me and Jim like grew up in, where you had to be on one team or the other. And we certainly questioned that. We were like, well, why can't we like Todd McFarlane and Peter Bagge at the same time? And it was really like you guys were, there was like a culture war or something like that, man. Like I will never stop bending the knee to you and the other Fantagraphics cartoonists who really were putting in that sweat equity through the 80s and the 90s to slowly get more and more people on board with this kind of comics, because through all of that hardship, and you illustrate it in this conversation, it was a tough road to hoe for a while there for you. And then you guys, through all of that tenacity, created a system where, when I hook up with Fanta, I just get to walk in the door, and I will never stop being thankful to your contribution to the medium of comics, as well as everybody else in that brand, in that imprint. It's the Fantagraphics brand in the 90s and the 80s could do almost no wrong, man. It was pretty exceptional stuff. And when you look at the old comics journals before they started publishing the brothers, Gary Groth like desperately wanted there to be good comics. Like in the famous Harlan Ellison interview, like the best that he could come up with at that point in time was like P. Craig Russell and Bernie Wrightson and guys like that. That was all that that Gary could kind of like see as being like the people who were kind of pushing the medium at that time. And that was still, a couple years away from the brothers. Just so fascinating, getting the opportunity to get to know you a little bit and really some first-hand stories.
The Hernandez brothers were pretty much exactly what Groth wanted to see. They're almost like heaven sent when he got his hands on their work.
Sure.
And that was the beginning of him publishing comic books. He couldn't believe that nobody else was publishing them. But everything about them, that was exactly what he was looking for. Because Groth himself and Kim, they were steeped in mainstream comics. That's what they were leaned on. It's just that they outgrew it, but they got mad that stuff didn't grow with them. Blame Jim Shooter. Like, no, I don't think they're supposed to grow up. They have their audience, and it's adolescent boys,
Oh yeah, it's so funny, man. There's the great photograph of teenage Gary Groth. It's like the camera's up here pointing down at his parents' house, like in his bedroom, at his folks' pad, and you see like Werewolf by Night comics on his bed and stuff.
Right.
It's really funny. And then Jimmy, my co-host here at Cartoonist Kayfabe, he did Hulk Grand Design, and one of the features that he did in the comic was he went through, he read every Hulk comic, and he went through even the letters pages, and he pulled a letters page from Kim Thompson, I think Eric Reynolds, and maybe Gary Groth, who all wrote letters into the Incredible Hulk comics.
Hulk of all things.
Yeah, totally. And Kim was his letter, I believe, was like right before or right after the introduction of Wolverine. So that was like, that was a key time to be an Incredible Hulk reader.
Right.
Pete, you mentioned Misfit Lit, which was a real highlight of pushing comics artwork to the fore in the 90s. But another thing that comes to mind is the infamous Hate Ball tour that you and Klaus went on in the 90s to kind of promote your comics. Something tells me that tour might have been a little bit different than a Peggy Burns Drawn and Quarterly tour that has Canadian government money behind it.
Well, well,
we are streaming, so people are listening. Just in case if you're
it was not drastically different, actually. I guess the only difference is when I did that, and it wasn't a huge tour that I did with Klaus, maybe 10, 12 events. I don't remember. But some places put us up in very nice hotels. And we were taken out to very nice dinners. Other places that we went to, it was rough. It was much more like I don't know if you've ever known people who are like in their own punk bands, their own indie bands.
Sure, yeah.
And they go on a tour and they're totally winging it. They'll just pull into Baltimore, look for any place to play, any place to stay. And a place to stay is usually, on a kitchen floor, in somebody's apartment. So it was a little bit that in some of the places we went to too. I can remember one hotel we checked into. First we saw it was like an old, a little bit cleaner than a flop house, but it looked like it was a flop house. We're like, uh-oh, what is this going to be about? And we go into the bedroom, and the room was so long and narrow that in order to get to the farther bed, whoever's going to sleep in that bed was going to always have to walk over the other person in that bed. And it had a window. And I can remember Dan Klaus going, I'm almost afraid to open this window. It was like from an old, Lauren Hardy comedy. We opened up the blinds, and it's all we saw was just 3 feet away was another brick wall. And a place that we stayed at in Athens, Georgia. We stayed at a great guy, the guy that owned the place, Bizarro Walk Street. We stayed at his place, and it was like this big old Victorian house that was divided into apartments. And so whenever he wanted to, instead of like knocking on the door or, calling them up, the people in the next apartment, they literally punched a hole in the wall and and there was a piece of wood there. So if they wanted to tell each other, they would just slide the piece of wood and stick their head through this hole in the wall.
Oh my goodness, man, that's amazing. Whenever I hooked up with Fanta, and it's interesting to think about, because when the first book for Hip Hop Family Tree was being published and printed, it was a victim of a government shutdown, whatever that year was. Like the first government employees or whatever who were like laid off or stopped working or whatever was like customs. So the whole slow boat comes over, docks in Jersey or wherever, and all my books are sitting on the wharf.
Really? Gee,
and this is when I came out to Seattle. Like Fanta was setting up a little bit of a tour, and I was away from home for 19 days. Huh. And I was out there, stayed at Eric's crib for a couple of days, stayed at Jack's. I spent the night at your house 1 or 2 days, man.
What book was that?
It was the first volume of Hip Hop Family Tree.
Oh, okay. That was a lot. Who published your first books?
I did top shelf for WYSIWYG, and then I was just drawing comics for Harvey Pekar for a while.
Okay.
So that's like he had New York publishers after the movie and stuff.
Right. Did hip hop come right after? Was that your next book after WYSIWYG?
Yeah. Huh. Yeah, for sure. And it was like I was done with almost 2 of them by the time the first one came out, so they were able to come out like really rapidly. But I think that they had some idea that like, I think we have something we could sell here, and they put me on that little bit of a tour. But I was still an unknown kind of quantity, so it would still be Fantagraphic style. So I even had like a lawyer at the time because I started getting Hollywood shit come in with hip hop and stuff, and he was so mad that whoever they had, it wasn't Gary or Eric, or he was one of the employees who was setting up the tour. They wanted to put me on a train from LA to San Francisco, and I think it's like 8 hours or something.
Yeah.
And he was like, fuck that. I refuse to let you get on a train. I will pay for it, blah, blah, blah. And I will invoice Fantagraphics. But it was pretty lo-fi. And then in San Fran, when I finally got there, the hotel, like where my room was, it was not far from that Tenderloin area.
Okay.
And outside my window, there was a fire escape with a ladder. And I'm just like, you have to move my room. There's no way I'll be able to go unconscious in this fucking room, because I'm hearing the craziest shit right outside my door. And there's access to my room by way of like two metal.
No, I stayed in a hotel in that area for a week, and it was insane. It was completely insane. That was about 20 years ago.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say one of the highlights of that little trip, though, was when staying at Reynolds' place and your place. I feel like, are you guys all in the same town?
What now?
At least back then, say 2013.
Yeah, I was walking distance from where Eric lived.
That's what I was going to say, is walking distance, and I think Jim Woodring is even walking distance. Is that true?
Not quite. Well, that would have been a long walk, but yeah, he didn't live too far. You know,
that was exciting stuff for me, because it's like, here's Pete Bagge's house, here's Jim Woodring's crib, here's Eric. Like that was wild. I'm like, all right, man, I'm in Seattle now. Like I'm in Fantagraphics territory.
Yeah. But go ahead. Were you gonna ask me something?
Yeah, no, go ahead, man.
Oh, just something that I meant to tell you. Speaking of hip hop, and this is a bit. Hopefully, I'll try to keep this brief. But you just had that discussion of that comic strip Kathy.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
The spoof of the comic strip Kathy that Crumb and I did together. And I think Jim was like, you were wondering what the process was, how we worked together.
Yes.
And the birth of the strip was, I was something about the strip Kathy. I know it's shooting fish in a barrel, spoofing a comic like that, because everybody even Kathy's fans make fun of Kathy. But something made me think about how the character, how she's like obsessed with eating and her weight. But you don't get because of the way it's drawn, you don't get a real sense of Kathy's physique. You know, it's drawn very primitively. But for some reason I thought, well, what if she was, quote unquote, like if Kathy was real? What if she was like quote unquote fat in all the right places? Like fat in the way that,
make her a Crumb girl.
Yeah, a Crumb girl, or the way rappers would sing about.
Yeah, sure.
Baby's got back. And so that was like a starting point. I said, I think I got an idea, just from that, I'm going to do my own take on Kathy. And I think I wrote it out in longhand, and then I wrote or called Crumb and I said, do you think you'd want to draw something like this? And he's like, oh, geez, I don't know. Spoof it. Kathy, he thought the same thing, shooting fish in a barrel. And so I got this take on it that I think you might like. And he goes, well, just send me whatever you got. And I said, okay. So I roughed the whole thing out. I did a pretty, with ballpoint pen, but I did a pretty tight rough of the whole thing. I don't know what I would have done if he didn't do it, draw it myself. I don't know. But I sent it off to him. He was living in France at the time. He didn't have the internet. So it was all snail mail. I had to wait forever. I was just simply waiting for him to tell me if he was going to do it or not. And I figured he wasn't. Next thing I know, he sends it back to me and it's done.
Amazing.
He read the script. He didn't even tell me he liked it. He just read it and immediately drew it. He just banged it out. So he changed a few things. It was funny, some of the things he changed, like Kathy's boyfriend. I can't even remember in the comic strip what the boyfriend's name is, but I made some little play on that guy's name. But Crumb changed it to Elton. I said, why did you name the guy Elton? And at the time, his daughter, Sophie Crumb, who was like a teenager, I guess, was going through a big Elton John phase. So Crumb was hearing Elton John all the time. Wherever he went, he was just hearing Elton John music. And he kept thinking, Elton, what a stupid name. For that reason alone, he was, I'm going to call this guy Elton.
It's so good, man.
But
did he did the Zipatones on that too?
That's a good. When I was watching you talk about that, I can't remember how those great tones were done. I might have done it because I had Photoshop at the time, so I might have scanned it, but I don't think he would have let me. And then I would look at, he would do these things when he would use, like even when he was doing color separations, he would add little bits of white out to different parts of, like it wasn't cut. You could tell he was brushing white out onto it. And you could see a little bit of that in that Kathy strip. So it must have been old Zipatone that he used. But something that you might find amusing is, as you probably well know, Crumb hates, he doesn't like modern music and he hates hip hop, hates rap with a passion. But he loves Baby Got Back. He loves that song, and he knows every word. He will rap that song. So,
and once again, man, that's Seattle represent Sir Mix-a-Lot. Like
there you go.
That's from the region.
Right.
I put a page. He drew in his sketchbooks. He was copying portraits and stuff from Word Up magazine. You can find them in the German sketchbooks and the Taschen sketchbooks. And I was staying. Actually, it was that exact trip where I was out in Seattle when I was staying with Eric every night. I never, I wasn't around to get those German sketchbooks, and they're like super expensive. So every night I would sit with one of Eric's Crumb sketchbooks and go through it. And eventually, like I got to, the 90s issues, or, the 90s book, and I came across these drawings that he did of rappers. And I had this gallery in the back of Hip Hop Family Tree. And it was like serendipity. Like I'm staying at Eric Reynolds' house. I'm going through this Crumb sketchbook. And I just took it right upstairs. I'm like, Eric, can we get in touch with Crumb ASAP? Because I want to publish this in the gallery in the back of Hip Hop Family Tree. And the next day, like the approval came in, and Crumb was like, "Yeah, go ahead, no sweat."
That's excellent. I'll be done. Yeah.
Yes,
he also he talked about it in the Crumb documentary. But I remember ages ago, like in 1989 or whatever it was. He was visiting me and he says, "Pete, do you ever watch this comedy show called In Living Color?" And I said, yeah, I watch that show. And he goes, "Do you like the Fly Girls?" J-Lo was one of them. I go, "Yeah, of course. Who doesn't like the Fly Girls?" And he's like, "Oh my God. Oh my."
Yeah, man. It was that Bitch and Bod story where he's talking about, when the headless lady is doing a bunch of moves, like
right.
he got the moves from Freeze, Flame, and the Fly. Freeze.
Yeah, he recorded him in Freeze.
Before we get out of here, since we're talking these backup stories, can you just let us know how did the Alan Moore one come about? The Kool-Aid Man story.
I only met Alan Moore once. We'd spoken on the phone and written to each other a bit after that. But way back, like in 1985, I met him. And this is so random. He was very complimentary about my comics. He liked neat stuff. And he says, "I'd love to collaborate with you if you ever want to." And I said, "Yeah, sure. Why not?" And I go, "Do you have something in mind?" And he said, "Yes." He goes, "Every time I come to America, I'm always struck by this product called Kool-Aid. And there's a character called the Kool-Aid Man. Because I want to do something with that." Okay, fine. And as the years went by, I did a few other small little collaborations with him. But he would always say, "I still want to do that." And I was like, okay. And then finally, when I was doing, I expanded Hate and was doing collaborations in the back, I think I contacted him, said, "Do you still want to do that?" And he says, "Yeah." He goes, "But here's the problem. They don't sell Kool-Aid in the UK. And he goes, "I really don't know anything about it." I go, "Why do you want to do a comic about it?" He goes, "I don't know, just that character, where his face is drawn in condensation." He was, it's just something with it, but I don't know what. So this is unfortunate. He, for me, he refused, and this was 1996, 97. He refused to use the internet. I can remember him telling me, he goes, "The internet's trouble." He goes, "You think you're watching them, they're watching you." And I was like, "Oh yeah, right." Paranoid. Of course he was right.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, totally.
But so I found this is like when the internet was in its infancy, and I found this page. I Googled something. This is pre-Google. I Alta Vista'd something, and it was called "Everything You Ever Wanted to Know About Kool-Aid and the Kool-Aid Man." was 50 pages long. I printed it out. I printed out the whole 50 pages. And then I had to, it's the only way I can get to him fast enough. I faxed all 50 pages to him in England. So I'm paying overseas rates. It cost me a fortune to fax these 50 pages to him. But that was all he needed. And from that, he just did I don't know why he decided to make him some beatnik, some Kerouac or Ginsberg type character. But there you go. That's how that came about.
Yeah, man. Got to get your hands on the complete Hate in preparation for the release of the new Hate comics that are going to start coming out in June. What is the name of the comic exactly, so that people can tell their shop owners what they want, and how is this thing going to come out? Is it going to be monthly?
Yes, it's called Hate Revisited, and and it's 4 months, one right after the other. So June, July, August, September, the 4 issues will come out. Then eventually it'll all be collected into a graphic novel. And I'm also doing just for like the inside, front and back covers, I'm doing collaborations with like David Corino, who I used to do Martini Baton with. We're doing strips together. Extremely politically incorrect strips I'm doing with him.
That's good, man. Got to keep these kids on their toes, Uncle Pete.
That's right.
Thanks so much for coming by. Before we split, though, let the people know where you're at on social media, if you keep up on social media with Twitter or Instagram or anything like that.
There's some guy named Peter Bagge got on Twitter before me, so I'm Peter Bagge1 on Twitter, and I'm on Facebook. I have like a personal page on Facebook and also a fan page. But and that would be like the fan page is Peter Bagge Artist. So I generally tend to I'm more on top of what I'm working on that page than I'm on the personal one. But I pretty much put the same crap on both of them, and that's it. I used to have my own website, but it was too big a pain to keep doing, so I gave up on it. Yeah. And that's it. That's my media presence. And you can I do a lot of comics, biographical comics now for Reason magazine. So if you go to reason.com and they have a little search engine, just type my name in there and you'll see every comic I've been doing for the last 20 years for them.
Uncle Pete, it's so nice to catch up with you. It's been way too long, and I cannot wait to see the new Hate comics. Kayfabe audience, go out there, put in your pre-orders, go to your comic shop, let them know that you want it. Thanks so much for coming by. Don't be a stranger, man. Let's do it again sometime.
And keep up the great work. Thanks a lot, Ed. Take care.
At Piscor here, going to have a solo art show with all the best hip-hop family tree artwork at the 707 Gallery in downtown Pittsburgh from April 6th through the end of August. If you're going to be in town, make sure you swing through downtown Pittsburgh, check out that art show. I also have the Switchblade Shorties daily comic strip that I'm presenting to you on all of my social media platforms, and there's a dedicated webtoon where you can get the latest Switchblade Shorties comics. Hip Hop Family Tree Omnibus, 40% off on Amazon right now. X-Men Grand Design Trilogy trade paperback. 3 flavors of Red Room. Crypto Killers trade paperback. Trigger Warnings, and The Antisocial Network. Jimmy has Street Angel, Princess of Poverty. Street Angel, Deadliest Girl Alive. He's self-publishing some stuff. True Crime Funnies, Black and White Zine, and the 1986 Zine are available at his website, jimrugg.com. The Jim Rugg Hulk Grand Design is out of print in its Treasury Edition format, but it's coming to you soon in trade paperback. Now that we're done paying the bills, let's get back to the video.